Hello guys, this is Mateusz Kolosowski, an international master from Poland, and this is the new video I've decided to record in cooperation with Remote Chess Academy. And this time I'm going to discuss how to play in an open center. And by an open center, this time we're going to understand a very extreme situation. So when there is exactly no pawns in the center, there is not a single pawn, neither on D nor on E file, which is a situation which doesn't occur on the chessboard very often, as you probably already know. In the course of this video, I will try to show you that, in my opinion, there's basically two secrets to be able to handle such positions in a successful way. And for the sake of depicting those ideas, I have decided to choose the game played between Vishy Anand and Alexander Belyavsky from Linares Super Tournament in 1992. I probably don't have to introduce Vishy Anand, the former world champion, whereas Alexander Belyavsky, as a former Soviet player who currently plays for Slovenia. Also, he used to be a coach for many national teams, and very strong player. Throughout the years, he has been very difficult to beat, and a very strong 2600 plus player. He used to be in top 10 at some point. So Vishy Anand is playing with white, Alexander Belyavsky is playing with black. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop B5. A6, bishop A4, knight F6, castles, bishop E7, rook E1, so this is Rai Lopez, one of the main lines, B5, bishop B3, D6, C3, castles, H3, knight B8, so the game is approaching the Zaitsev system, D4, knight BD7, knight BD2, bishop B7, black is very compact, he has a very solid position. He has maneuvered his knight from C6 to B8, then eventually to D7. Since the knight on C6, well, it achieved what it had to achieve on C6. It was protecting E5 pawn, and now it's going to be better placed on D7, and also it allowed black to develop his light square bishop to B7, which is objectively a very good spot for this piece since it attacks E4. There was bishop C2, rook E8, A4, bishop F8, so both players are playing in a very typical fashion. A4 is a way to undermine black's pawn formation on the queen side, and also to try to create some weaknesses for the future. It might be possible to take on B5 and then perhaps try to fix that pawn, and also try to attack it perhaps by means of B4 followed by bishop D3. And of course, at one point, white may want to be interested in exchanging the rooks along A file. So this is basically a move that, well, it should not create any problems for white, and in the meantime, it might be an asset in the future. Whereas black played bishop F8, now the rook is on E8 is a more active piece. A transfer of the bishop to G7 is also something that might be considered from black's perspective. So generally, the position is approximately balanced. There was bishop D3, so as you see, Anand is directly hitting B5 pawn in order not to give white two good chances, and in order to keep the position balanced, it's better just to play the passive C6 move. It's a very solid move. It blocks the bishop on B7, but the alternatives do not look that great, because Taking on a4 would leave black with a worse pawn formation, since a6 is going to be isolated pawn later on. Playing e takes d4, c takes d4, b4 enables white to take control over the center. So from practical viewpoint, c6 is definitely the right choice. Since the pawn on e4 is not hanging anymore, white played knight f1. And now queen c7 was a way to keep tension in the center, and also by connecting the rooks, we might already say that black is close to accomplishing his development. And perhaps he might want to play g6, bishop g7, just to make sure that the bishop on f8 it doesn't remain on f8, which is at this point quite a passive square for this piece. But well, this was a very logical approach. Instead, Belawski chose to play d5, which automatically creates great tension in the center. And as you see, from a relatively quiet position with maneuvering ideas, with very strategic type of a position, after d5 the position can get very aggressive, very tactical, full of some calculation, because now both of the players have to at least consider all of the captures in the center, and that would of course require some calculation to be performed, and lots of types of pawn structures can be achieved, because white can take on d5, later on black can take on d4, so we will have just d pawns left on the board. It's possible that all of these pawns will disappear, and this is exactly what happened in the game. So at this point, Vishy played bishop g5, which is a very nice way to keep tension on the board. I should probably mention that e takes d4 is probably not the right choice here, because white plays e5, and it seems that positionally black will be in great danger, even though he can play h6 and perhaps keep things under control more or less, but this doesn't look that convincing. So after bishop g5, since I believe d takes e5 or even e takes d5 was possible at this point, Belawski decided to take on e4 himself. And after d takes e4, a nice trick, rook takes e4. It's impossible to take with the knight on e4, and the rook is also making great impact on the center. I don't believe black should be playing something like e takes d4, because after e takes d4, white can just play rook takes d4, and now even bishop f6 is dangerous. The rook on d4 is of course a fantastic piece, and this is when we could actually stop. This is the moment when we could actually stop for a moment, because here even the position looks seemingly innocent. It looks like it's symmetric. There is pretty much nothing going on. It might be very misleading, because in such open positions, when there is not a single pawn on neither e nor d file, when the position is symmetric on both parts of the board, meaning that there is 3 pawns on queen side and 3 pawns on king side for each side, the decisive factors seems to be activity and also initiative. So at this point it's quite clear that the rook on d4 and both bishops actually provide white with great many tactical resources. That is why we can say that it is white who managed to seize the initiative. Of course, another important factor here is that white controls d file and black controls e file. But there is a huge difference between the importance of those files, because on d file there's actually quite a lot of pieces. The rook on d4 pins the knight on d7, and when you put that together with the pin along h4 d8 diagonal, it actually makes black's defensive task quite difficult. And on the other hand, e-file is completely empty, so the rook on e8, okay, it's nicely positioned, but besides that, it's doing literally nothing. So it's quite clear that the rook on d4, even though it might look strange because you don't often put the rook on such a square in the opening, in fact it's a very important piece and it enables white to claim some advantage. If it's much or not, it's a different question. White still hasn't achieved anything, and it's possible for black to neutralize this disadvantage that white currently has. But still, it's going to be very difficult for black to do that, and it looks like a risk-free position for white. So, from practical viewpoint, white has the better chances. After rook takes e4, black went bishop e7, so this still doesn't open the position entirely. There was rook e2. Now there's pretty much nothing to do other than e takes d4. Of course, knight takes d4. We don't want to take back with the pawn because that would leave us with an isolated pawn on d4, which of course can be blockaded by means of knight d5, and it seems that black is going to be doing quite nicely after we recapture the pawn on d4. Of course, this is going to be potentially weak. Instead, it's better to take back with the piece. And after knight d4, black went bishop f8. So again, we have pretty much the same situation. Now, instead of the rook on d4, there is a knight there. But again, Vishy correctly assessed the situation. Since he has more space, it's quite clear that he has more space. His pieces indicate that there is more active pieces in white's position. In white's camp, the bishop on b7 is blockaded, is blocked by the pawn on c6. So in such a case, what you want to do in order to keep the initiative, in order to take advantage of your space advantage, you don't want to exchange pieces, and it's better to transfer the rook to d2. A very powerful move. It also might be very useful since again there is a pin on h4 d8 diagonal. The knight on d7 can also well, it shouldn't feel very safe, and the queen on d8 is actually a very misplaced piece at this point. So that position required some precision from Bielawski, and he went queen c7, releasing the tension on this dark square diagonal. That's a logical continuation. White went bishop f5, and here I should probably mention that bringing the rest of the pieces into action by means of knight e3 doesn't look to be that convincing, because after g6 followed by bishop g7, unless white finds some very aggressive piece sacrifice on f5, it seems that black is going to be able to consolidate, and he's going to be able to equalize. c5 is about to come, and after that black is going to be just fine. So he controls f5 square, c5 comes, then probably c4, and I believe that with such a bishop on b7, black may actually be even able to take over the initiative, as there is pretty much nothing going on d-file at this point. So instead, again, initiative is something really important in such symmetric positions, and Vishy decided to attack the knight on d7 by means of bishop f5. Rook d8 is impossible right now because white just takes on d7 and then takes on f6, leaving black with a very damaged pawn structure. Let me perhaps put that on the board. So rook d8 would be met with bishop d7, and after rook d7, of course the knight on f6 is pinned, so we have to take back with the rook or the queen. And that doesn't look that great for black. Even though he has the bishop pair in an open position, I believe that black's unsafe king is the more important factor at this point. Also, there is probably just some tactics here. After queen g4, king h8, knight takes b5, followed by taking the rook on d7, seems to be winning material. So bishop f5 was actually quite a cunning way to keep things under control. There was c5, releasing the tension and also attacking the knight on d4, knight f3, knight e5, exchanging or at least attempting to exchange pieces, knight e5, rook takes e5, very powerful move. And now bishop f4 doesn't give white anything. In fact, it makes black's position just great after queen c6, threatening checkmate on g2, and after knight e3, black just takes the rook on f5 because the knight on e3 is overloaded. So this was a beautiful way for Bielawski to fight for initiative as well, because now it seems that the bishop on b7 is very active, and if he manages to coordinate that bishop with the queen, it is actually black who's going to enjoy some initiative. There was knight e3 straight away, queen c6, a takes b5, a takes b5, exchange of the rooks. The rook on a1 was pretty much useless. Bishop f6, and here it seems that Bielawski made a bit of a mistake because he played queen takes f6, and this allowed Vishy to claim initiative on d file, and he played rook d8, pinning the bishop on f8 and also attacking the bishop on a8, and that actually proved to be very, very annoying from black's perspective. Instead, it was better to use this very little tactical idea, so rook takes f5, and the best way for white to deal with this position seems to be bishop e7, and after bishop e7, rook d8 check is a very nice tactical resource, because after bishop d8, queen d8, white wins on spot, and bishop f8 leads actually to either rook takes a8 followed by knight f5, or even something like this. Exchange of the queens, knight f5, and even though normally in such positions the bishop is better than the knight because we have an open position, if white manages to fix that pawn on b5 on a light square and put all of his pawns on dark squares, so not allowing the bishop, the black bishop, to attack any of white's pawns, the knight can actually prove to be a better piece. Of course, that would require a quick march of the white king towards the center, but for an experienced player, a good technical player, it's possible to achieve an advantage here, although this is very it has to be played very precisely. So instead of that continuation, Bielawski played queen f6, and now, as I told you, Vishy obtained a very powerful initiative. He played rook d8, and it seems that Bielawski missed some tactical idea, because now he was just forced to play g6. If he played something like queen c6, protecting the bishop, then there's bishop h7, king h7, rook f8, and after rook e3, queen h5, forcing the exchange of the queens on h6, seems to be winning. So this is apparently what Bielawski missed, because if g6 is forced, then this position is of course very bad due to just white's superior pawn structure. And in fact, Vishy converted that advantage very convincingly. Without the bishop on a8, black is pretty much deprived of any active counterplay. The bishop on f8 is very passive, and of course white has easy targets to attack. h5 is an attempt to control g4 square and to prepare f4. Knight d5, queen h6, g3, so making sure that the king doesn't get attacked. Rook e1 check, king h2, h4, knight e7, king h8, knight f5. This is very close to the end. H takes g3, knight takes g3. The king is still much safer than the black counterpart. King g8 back, queen takes b5. White is already up 2 pawns. Queen d6, queen c4. And as far as I understand, at this point Bielawski lost on time, but this still doesn't change and would not change the outcome of the game. I'm pretty sure Vishy would convert this convincingly. He's basically up 2 pawns. Of course, it's still a matter of time, but we can say that the final result is a fair one. So what you could learn from this game is actually that whenever there is an open center, what you need to try to do is to seize the initiative, because well, the position is usually going to be symmetric, and in a symmetric position it's extremely difficult to create anything weak in your opponent's position. Sometimes you might be able to do that, sometimes not. Another thing to remember is that picking the right open file in the center might prove to be essential. As you saw in this game, black controlled E file, whereas white controlled D file, and it did prove that D file was definitely the more important file. Also, for the majority of the game, Vishy managed to keep his pieces more active than Bielawski's pieces, which of course made his task a bit easier. And there is one more thing which I could not depict in this game, because there was simply not a single moment when such a situation existed. In open center and generally in open positions, bishops are better than the knights, and this is especially important when one of the players manages to get the bishop parry. The bishop parry in open positions can prove to be a very important resource, strategic resource, but unfortunately in this game, as you see, this wasn't a factor. In any case, I hope that this video and my guidance will enable you to be a more efficient player in open positions, and I hope you enjoyed this game itself and the video as well. And thanks for watching. This has been Mateusz Kolosowski for Remote Chess Academy.